There is a truth that everyone must eventually face, only that each person arrives at it at a different time in life. This world is not fair. And if you continue searching for absolute fairness, you will exhaust yourself before you ever grow up. You can be honest and still be doubted. You can be the best and still be overlooked. You can be sincere and still be betrayed. Not because you are not talented enough, but because life does not operate by the principles of goodness. It operates by the survival instincts of human beings. People often say, just live well and beneficial things will come, but perhaps they forgot to add. Sometimes, living well merely positions you as the most vulnerable individual in the room, and by the time you realize it, it's already too late. There is a very particular kind of wound. It doesn't make you cry. It makes you silent. You no longer argue, no longer justify, and no longer try to prove yourself right. You simply look at the world with different eyes, no longer naive, no longer believing every promise, but no longer frustrated either. That is the first moment of awakening. When a person has gone through enough disappointment, they begin to observe instead of react. They watch how people speak, then watch how they act, and realize that those two things rarely match. They begin to notice the pauses in speech, the shifting of eyes, the way someone laughs too loudly or stays silent too long, and they realize everything has its own language. The question is whether you are awake enough to read it. In a world where everyone rushes to display themselves, the truly strong ones are those who step back and observe. They do not need to prove anything, because they understand proving is the work of someone who still doesn't know who they are. And once you've seen the essence, every explanation becomes unnecessary. A truly mature person does not chase right or wrong. They seek understanding so they won't get dragged into the chaos, because they know that the price of wanting to be understood in a world of illusions is losing your peace of mind. There are people who used to be kind but then became cold, not because they wanted to, but because life forced them to. Coldness does not come from indifference. It comes from feeling too much without being met, again and again. From promises unkept, from trust being exploited, from having to learn to stand back up with no one reaching out a hand. And then, amidst that pile of ruins, something strange happens. You become perceptive, no longer impulsive, no longer believing every sweet word, but not bitter either. You begin to understand that the one who hurt you is simply a soul who has not yet learned their lesson. The world does not need your anger. It only needs your clarity. This is the beginning of another kind of intelligence, not loud, not arrogant, not boastful, but quietly present in your eyes, in your breath, and in the way you stay calm when others lose control. That intelligence is called dark intelligence, a form of understanding not born from books, but forged through pain. It is not something you learn, but something you become after going through enough wounds while still choosing to keep your humanity. Dark intelligence begins when you realize people do not act from logic, they act from fear. And if you want to understand the world, don't listen to what they say. Watch what they are trying to hide, because humans are not as good at lying as they think. Fear always leaks through the smallest movements, through the voice, through the eyes, through the way someone laughs when nothing is funny, or the way they fall silent when everyone else is loud. The world is not fair, but it always reveals the truth to those who are quiet enough to notice. Fairness does not exist in rules. It exists in perception. Those who understand the laws of life do not resent. They only need to observe. And in that observation, you begin to see the loudest person is often the weakest. The one who talks most about morality is often hiding something, and the one who acts strongest is often the most afraid. Once you understand this, you become less shocked, less hurt, and less likely to place your hope in the wrong places. Because instead of expecting the world to be fair, you begin learning how to adapt to truth. This is not about submitting to others. This is not about pretending. But by understanding to survive, you must learn to observe. To protect yourself, you must learn to remain silent. And so, in a world where everyone is trying to speak faster than everyone else, the one who slows down is the one who sees the clearest. No one among us awakens on peaceful days. Human beings only begin to learn when the world stops being gentle with them. And dark intelligence. The intelligence born in darkness is created in that very moment. When you lose trust, when you are betrayed, when you witness the true face of someone you once believed would never hurt you. A part of you collapses, but another part, the part that has been silent for so long, begins to wake up. You start to see. Not with your eyes, but with your intuition, not through logic, but through a deeper sensing of human nature. You look at a smile and know something isn't real. You hear an apology and feel the cold distance behind the voice. You realize that words are only the outer shell, and the truth always lies in the way someone stays silent. Before, you may have believed that understanding comes from books, that the more knowledge a person has, the wiser they are. But then you realize, wisdom does not come from what we know, but from what we have endured. Those who have walked through pain understand that truth is never simple. No one is entirely good. No one is entirely bad. No one is always honest. No one is always deceitful. People are merely trying to survive in the only way they know how, and that recognition makes you less extreme. You're no longer quick to hate and no longer quick to believe. You become calm. A person with dark intelligence understands without needing to say anything. They do not need to expose anyone, because they know whatever is false will reveal itself sooner or later. They do not need to win every argument, because they know the more someone tries to prove themselves, the weaker they are. They do not need to explain every misunderstanding, because they know truth does not need acceptance, it only needs time. Dark does not mean negative. Darkness is simply where we begin to see our own light clearly. Without night, we would never realize where true light comes from. And without being hurt, we would never learn how to protect our heart. Many fear the word dark because they think it means toxicity. Many people fear the word dark because they associate it with toxicity, coldness, or cruelty. But dark here does not refer to evil. It refers to the parts of ourselves we do not want to look at, the raw face of who we become when we are wounded, the survival instincts that surface when we are pushed to the edge. When you have gone through the dark, you no longer fear it. You understand that darkness never intended to kill you. It simply wanted to teach you how to see. When everyone around you rushes to react, you pause to observe. When someone speaks with bitterness, you do not retaliate. You simply ask, what inside them makes them need to do this? When someone wants you to fall apart, you do not grow angry. You just smile, because you understand. Those who want to hurt others are usually carrying a pain they cannot handle. Dark intelligence is the ability to understand without hating. Understanding helps you avoid falling into emotional traps. To understand so you can see the essence and then choose the wisest response instead of the most impulsive one. It is the wisdom of someone who's been weak before, and therefore knows what true strength is. When you possess dark intelligence, you begin to sense the shifts in energy in every conversation. You know when to speak and when to stay silent. You know when to smile and when to withdraw. No longer reacting from instinct, you begin reacting based on strategy. Ordinary people react with emotion. A person with intelligence reacts with purpose. You do not need to win. You only need to understand why you are there. There is a special stillness in those who have suffered and still kept their humanity. They do not need to appear strong, because they have been weak and survived. They do not need to prove they are trustworthy, because they have been misunderstood and remained peaceful. They do not need praise, because they have gone through a time when no one recognized them and they still stood firm. Dark intelligence does not teach you how to control others. It teaches you how not to be controlled, not to be led by compliments, not to be shaken by criticism, not to be distracted by trivial things. And that is precisely why this intelligence is dangerous. Because those who possess it are difficult to grasp, difficult to persuade, and difficult to hurt. For they have already seen the worst in people, and they know nothing can truly destroy them anymore. There's an old saying, only when you have walked through hell do you stop fearing fire. A person with dark intelligence has walked through enough fire to understand. The flames are not what we should fear, only not knowing why they burn. And they choose to keep that flame within themselves, not to burn the world down, but to illuminate their path. After you've seen the true nature of the world, the next step is not to change it, but to learn how to remain steady within it. The truth is, you cannot make life fairer, but you can become awake enough not to be swept away by it. When you understand human psychology, you can use that understanding in two ways. One is to manipulate, the other is to protect yourself, and the line between the two is very thin. Those who choose manipulation usually start with fear. Fear of losing power, fear of being hurt, and fear of being abandoned. They want to control others, because deep inside, they cannot control themselves. Those who choose self-protection, on the other hand, also understand human psychology, but they use it to preserve their peace. There are three unspoken rules of people who have survived the darkness: understand, hold, and observe. Understand, so you don't fall into emotional traps. Hold, so you don't reveal the psychological map of your inner world to others. Observe, so you know when to leave, when to stay, and when to stay silent. Immature people think being smart means knowing how to win over others. But those who have lived enough understand. That true wisdom is knowing when a battle doesn't need to be fought. Not every fight is worth entering. Not everyone deserves your energy. Because in every fight, even if you win, you still lose something: time, peace, or a piece of your humanity. People with dark intelligence do not seek victory. They seek balance. Balance between reaction and silence. They strive to strike a balance between understanding and forgiveness. They must strike a balance between compassion and logic. They understand that some insults do not require a response, because responding is a reward to someone who wants to provoke you. Some relationships do not need explanations, because if someone has already chosen to believe the worst of you, then every justification becomes meaningless. You learn to withdraw your energy from places that don't deserve it, because what exhausts you is not the world itself, but your effort to make the world understand you. People with dark intelligence do not attack, but they are always ready to defend, not with coldness, but with intentional silence, because they know. In a room full of noise, the silent one is the most listened to. No one can defeat someone who refuses to react the way they expect. No one can control someone who does not need to be accepted. And no one can hurt someone who no longer fears loss. Someone once asked, "If I understand others, can I make them do what I want?" The answer is yes, but you will pay for it. Because every act of manipulation comes with a price. You either pay with loneliness or with losing yourself. When you control someone, you are not truly stronger than them. You simply become another version of the people who once hurt you. And in doing so, you are not evolving. You are repeating the same cycle, just with a different role. People with dark intelligence choose a different path. They do not seek to win. They seek to understand. They do not seek to possess. They seek to see clearly. They do not control others because they understand that control is merely the symptom of fear. When you are truly strong, you do not need to hold anyone, and you do not need to bind anyone. You only need clarity. Clarity in perception, clarity in boundaries, clarity in what you allow in your life. Understand to protect yourself, not to close your heart. It's important to recognize who is worthy of entering your life, not to distrust everyone, but to avoid giving your soul to someone who does not know how to honor it. You learn to give selectively, to trust with limits, and to love with awareness, understanding that love does not need to be blind to be deep. The more you mature, the more you understand. A trustworthy person is not someone who is always right, but someone who does not hide their intentions. A safe person is not someone perfect, but someone who does not make you guess. And a wise person is not someone who knows everything, but someone who knows what does not need to be said. From here, you begin to change. You no longer react emotionally. You react from purpose. You do not speak to prove. You speak to guide. You do not stay silent to avoid. You stay silent to observe. And gradually, you become someone others cannot easily read, not because you are hiding, but because you have become so calm that you no longer need to perform. One day, you will realize you are no longer pulled into meaningless arguments, no longer need to be liked, no longer feel the urge to be understood. You simply live clear, steady, and unshaken. Because you have learned the most important lesson of all. You understand others not to control them, but to remain yourself among them. People often think the more honest and transparent you are, the more respected you will be. But the world does not operate according to the logic of clarity. The world operates according to the allure of the unknown. Have you ever met someone you couldn't stop contemplating? Not because they were overly attractive, but because they never said everything. They tell half a story, leave half a space blank, and it is exactly that space that activates your imagination. You try to understand them, guess them, and get them, but the more you try, the more you see them staying silent while still controlling the entire rhythm of the conversation. That is the power of calculated opacity, intentional ambiguity. It is not dishonest vagueness, but it's the art of holding back, not to deceive others, but to protect your energy, your image, and your own narrative. In this world, power does not lie in how much you say, but in what you choose not to say. Weak people need to be understood. Strong people keep a part of themselves that no one fully understands. Because when you share your entire story, you unintentionally hand someone the map of your mind, with all its weaknesses, habits, beliefs, fears, and boundaries. And once someone holds that map, they don't need to attack you. They just need to take the shortcut. Intentional ambiguity occurs when you have a clear understanding of one specific idea. Not everyone who asks deserves to know. Not everyone who asks deserves to know. Not because you are hiding, but because you know the value of silence. Silence is not emptiness. It is a force field where true power is created. In silence, you hear more. you observe more. And often, your silence makes others reveal more than they intended. When someone asks, "What are you doing this weekend?" an ordinary person answers, "I'm staying home, watching movies, and resting." That answer ends the conversation. But a subtle person says, "I've got a few things to take care of." A simple sentence, but it opens countless possibilities. It makes the listener curious. They begin filling in the missing pieces themselves, and within their imagination, your power is born. People with dark intelligence understand that not everyone needs to know everything about you to trust you. And not every truth should be revealed all at once. Honesty is valuable, but wisdom lies in knowing when and to whom. You're not lying. You're simply choosing the angle of truth you want to share. Like light passing through frosted glass, still light, but softer, safer, and not blinding to anyone. Machiavelli once said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, but only a few know who you really are." People with calculated opacity do not try to be understood by everyone. They understand that attraction doesn't lie in being clearly seen, but in knowing when to let others see you as slightly blurred. In an age where everyone wants to speak, the one who knows how to stay silent is the one who stands out. In a world where everyone reveals everything, the one who knows how to hold back is the most formidable. Ambiguity makes you unpredictable, and what cannot be predicted cannot be controlled. The clearer you are, the easier you are to read. The easier you are to read, the easier you are to lead. But those who keep a thin layer of mist around them will always make others adjust their tone when they approach. There's a subtle power in those who need not prove anything. They don't boast, don't explain, and don't react. And for that reason, they make others measure their words carefully, not because they are intimidating, but because they make others aware of their presence. Loud people make others careless. Silent people make others attentive. Because silence is not emptiness, it is gravity, pulling every attention toward you. Calculated opacity is the ability to remain mysterious without pretending. By not creating a different persona, but by keeping the part of you that others have not yet earned the right to see. Not out of arrogance, but to preserve your own energy. Each of us has only a limited amount of mental energy. Wise people do not spread it across every conversation, every question, every curious gaze. They focus that energy on deep observation and understanding. But those who cannot hold back talk constantly, reveal constantly, explain constantly until exhaustion leaves them empty. For they wasted their energy trying to be understood instead of trying to understand others. There is a strange law. The less you say, the more weight every word you speak carries. The less you appear, the more attention you command when you do appear. That is the paradox of influence. Scarcity creates power. Calculated opacity keeps you from needing to fight for the spotlight. You simply remain present within the dim light, just clear enough to be felt, but not exposed enough to be grasped. You don't need to be mysterious by performance. You just need restraint. Restraint in speech, restraint in emotion, restraint in presence. For what makes you valuable is not that everyone understands you, but that very few truly understand you, and they cherish it. People with calculated opacity are not afraid of being misunderstood, because they do not need to be loved by everyone. They only need to maintain the upper hand. The upper hand of observation, the upper hand of someone who does not need to speak loudly, yet makes everyone listen when they finally speak. There are people who go through life never learning how to change. They live like a song with only one note, honest, straightforward, and unchanged no matter the situation. At first glance, it seems admirable. However, in the real world, they are the ones who break the easiest when the wind shifts direction. Sincerity does not equate to immobility, and consistency does not mean rigidity. Life does not reward those who cling to the same form. It rewards those who can move without losing their essence. People with dark intelligence understand one thing clearly. You cannot be the same person in every room. In each place, the energy is different, the roles are different, and you, if perceptive enough, will know how to appear at the right frequency. Such an appearance is not inauthentic. It is a higher form of ethical adaptability. Like water, water never keeps a fixed shape, but its essence remains clear, soft, and powerful. When it encounters stone, it effortlessly navigates through the crevices. When it meets obstacles, it finds another path. Yet wherever it goes, it is still water. You are the same. You can speak differently, act differently, but your inner essence remains yours. Adaptation does not make you lose your roots. It makes you flexible, deep, and resilient. The inexperienced call this wearing a mask. The seasoned call it choosing the frequency that fits the moment. In every conversation, every environment, there is always a hidden language that only the perceptive can read. That language does not lie in words, however, in the pauses between sentences, in the shift of someone's gaze, in the way they choose silence in moments where they should have smiled. People with an adaptive persona don't just listen, they translate. They read energy, emotion, and intention, and they choose the most appropriate response, not to please, but to maintain balance in the connection. You cannot speak to a child the same way you speak to a scholar. You cannot negotiate with someone afraid the same way you negotiate with someone frustrated. Every person you meet is a separate psychological system, and to connect with them, you must learn their language. Shallow people think, I'll just be myself. But who is myself? Myself in love, myself when betrayed, myself in silence. All of those are still you. You have many versions, and each version is a true piece of you. The issue is not that you change. The issue is whether you remain conscious while you change. Fake people change to be loved. Wise people change to understand and adapt. The difference lies in awareness. One comes from the instinct to be accepted. The other from the intention to harmonize without losing oneself. You do not need to be like them. You only need to understand them. And respond in a way that keeps both sides unharmed. Adaptation does not make you weak, it makes you unbreakable. Because when you can shift form, no one can trap you. Strength cannot resist everything, but blending into everything without dissolving. In communication, the adaptive persona is the ability to read someone's emotional map. If the person carries logical energy, you speak in facts and logic. If they carry emotional energy, you speak with warmth and empathy. If they carry defensive energy, you speak in calmness, not threat. If they carry open energy, you speak in honesty and resonance. This is not acting. It is the subtlety of connection. When you learn how to be flexible while remaining true, you become free. No environment can make you feel out of place. You can speak to the powerful without fear. Speak to the wounded without pity. Speak to the arrogant without being pulled into their game. You do not change to please. You change to preserve the balance between compassion and wisdom. Adaptive persona does not teach you to pretend. It teaches you to understand deeply so you can maintain harmony without losing boundaries. Sometimes just shift your tone, your breath, your gaze changes the entire energy of the interaction. The more someone understands themselves, the easier they adapt. They do not fear losing themselves in the eyes of others. They know they are not the mask they wear. They are the ones choosing to wear it. True freedom arrives when you no longer need to prove who I am. You only need to know where I am and what is needed right now. Some people are the same in every situation, and they are proud of it. But in truth, that is not honesty. It is the rigidity of the mind, but the wise. They can be windy in a closed room, water in a narrow crack, fire in the darkness, and no matter the form, their essence is still the light of understanding. So stop fearing your changes. Change does not kill you. Clinging to the old is what kills you slowly. The true self is not the unchanging outer shell. It is the consciousness that knows why it is shifting. A person with an adaptive persona doesn't need to be the smartest in the room. They only need to be the one who understands the room's energy the best. This is why, even without speaking much, they are the ones who set the rhythm. People spend their whole lives holding on to love, holding on to work, holding on to image, holding on to status, holding on to the feeling of being needed. And the more we cling, the more fearful we become. We become fearful of losing our grip. We are afraid of the unknown. We fear the emptiness that may follow. What hurts us is not the loss itself, but the belief that we must possess something to feel safe. And yet, the truth is this: everything we ever tried to hold on to has already left us once, and life still continued. The person you once believed was forever vanished one ordinary afternoon. A single email replaced the job you thought you'd keep until retirement. Even you, the version of yourself from 5 years ago, no longer exists. When we begin to see the present clearly, we understand that attachment is instinct, but letting go is wisdom. Attachment itself isn't wrong. It helps us love, trust, and move forward. But when attachment turns into fear, it is no longer love. It becomes dependence. A person who does not know how to let go becomes a prisoner of their emotions. But someone who can detach themselves from the fear of loss can see, hear more deeply, and live more lightly. Detachment does not mean coldness. It is freedom in awareness. You still love, but you're not entangled. You still care, but you do not lose yourself. You still take part in life, but do not let it sweep you away. Detachment does not distance you from the world. On the contrary, it allows you to touch the world with clarity. Most of our pain does not come from reality, but in our refusal to accept it. We resist change. We desire to preserve everything as it was during our happiest moments. But life is not a photograph, it is a river, and every river must flow, no matter how tightly we cling. Those who understand these principles do not try to stop the water. They simply learn to swim with it. When you no longer fear losing, everything becomes lighter. Because when something leaves, you realize it was never truly yours. It merely walked with you for a time to teach you something and left when the lesson was done. Love is like that. Work is like that. Even the people you once believed were destiny, they are like that too. People with dark intelligence understand one thing. Whatever you fear losing, that's what controls you. When you no longer fear, you reclaim your power. A person who does not fear losing their job can speak the truth without flattery. A person who does not fear losing someone can love sincerely without clinging. A person who does not fear losing their reputation can live authentically instead of performing. And in this state of not fearing, they become trustworthy because they need nothing from anyone. You will see that every trustworthy form of manipulation in this world begins with the fear of loss. Someone controls you by making you fear losing what you love: a person, a position, an opportunity, an image. But if you understand that nothing truly is yours, every threat loses its power. You cannot be bound by something you are willing to let go of. And that is the highest form of freedom. Freedom from fear is the ultimate form of freedom. There is a profound difference between numbness and detachment. Numbness is when you close your heart because you fear pain. Detachment is when you open your heart but do not let pain blind you. You still feel, but you do not shatter. You still love, but you do not wither. You still live fully, but you do not lose yourself in it. Those who practice detachment do not live coldly. They live consciously. They know when to stop, when you let someone go, and when to let a door close. Not because they do not care, but because they understand everything that begins must have an end. And you cannot truly love if you are afraid of endings. A deep relationship is not built on dependence, but on two people free enough to choose to stay. A good job is not a place you cling to, but a place where you are free to grow and free to leave. A meaningful life does not come from holding everything tightly, but from knowing how to cherish something while it is here and let it go when it is gone. People with detachment live lightly because they no longer wish to possess anyone or anything. They only seek to understand and to let everything be itself. And precisely because they do not try to hold on, everything naturally stays. That is the paradox of freedom. When you stop gripping life, life opens itself in your hands. You will know you have learned detachment when something that once hurt you deeply comes back and you simply smile. You feel no resentment, hatred, or regret, only understanding. It was beautiful once, but now it is over. When you stop expecting things to last forever, every moment becomes more precious. Because you understand beauty does not need to be eternal, it only needs to be real. Detachment is when you stand in a world full of attachments and still maintain a quiet space within. You can love without possessing, give without calculating, and leave without blaming. This is not the art of living, it is the art of inner freedom. There are people who walk into a room without saying a word, yet every gaze naturally turns toward them, not because they are powerful, not because they are beautiful, but because they carry weight, not the weight of muscles or status, but the weight of quiet energy. That is silent leverage. Power that doesn't need proclamation, influence that doesn't require words, a presence that makes others adjust themselves without you having to do anything at all. Most people confuse power with loudness. They think the one who speaks the loudest is the strongest. But in any real confrontation, it is the silent one who holds the rhythm. Because while others are still reacting, the silent one has already begun observing. While they try to dominate, you've already begun reading them. And while they burn their energy trying to prove something, you conserve yours to calculate. People with silent leverage do not speak out to win. They speak to set the pace. Sometimes they don't need to speak at all, because their silence is the answer. Have you noticed that in a conversation, the person who stays silent longer often causes the other person to lose composure first? They begin talking and revealing more, and eventually exposing things they never meant to say. That's because silence creates a psychological void, and most people fear that void. Silence at the right moment is a form of power. The purpose of silence is not to manipulate, but to restore balance. When you don't rush to react, you allow others to show more of themselves, and you gain something far more valuable than any justification. This is the unadulterated truth. Sometimes, with just a single look, a slower breath, a stillness while someone else is trying to prove their point, you have already won. Because the other person begins to question their stance. In a world obsessed with speed, silence becomes a form of class. It makes others feel rather than merely hear you. The energy of a calm person can stir more depth than 1,000 words ever could. It doesn't need to take up space, it simply needs to exist. It is akin to a tranquil lake. No noise, no waves, yet everything reflected in it sees itself clearly. People with silent leverage are the same. They don't force anyone to do anything, yet others naturally behave better in their presence. You can call it influence through presence, not through speech, but through frequency. When your mind is still, no one can drag you into their chaos. When your energy is steady, everyone around you begins adjusting themselves to match you, without even realizing it. This is the science of influence. The person with the strongest energy sets the tone of the entire room. The person with the calmer mind pulls the whole space into stillness. Notice this. The one trying to control always speaks the most. The one who truly has power speaks the least. They don't need to repeat, emphasize, or push, because they know. Anything spoken too early loses its weight. They understand that silence is how you let people witness your strength, instead of hearing you talk about it. At work, silent leverage is knowing when to wait. When someone is impatient, you don't follow their pace. When a partner tries to pressure you, you don't rush to answer. When others lose their calm, you keep your breathing steady. And for that reason, every final decision ends up waiting for you. A strategically calm person makes others depend on their timing. And once someone starts adjusting to your rhythm, they have already handed you their power voluntarily. In relationships, silent leverage is steady non-reaction. You don't threaten, don't lash out, and don't walk away to prove something. You simply withdraw your energy from the toxic exchange. And when you withdraw your energy, you withdraw the other person's ability to control the situation. No one can manipulate someone who does not react. No one can hurt someone who does not need to prove they're right. People with silent leverage do not persuade with words. They guide with presence. They are the quietest person in the room. Yet it's the one everyone listens to the most. They don't need to impose, because their confidence comes from a deeper place. They possess a profound understanding of human nature. They understand that everyone wants to feel acknowledged, and silence at the right moment is how you make someone hear themselves. In a world where everyone wants to speak, people with silent leverage choose to listen. They listen not to respond, but to understand. Instead of reacting, they choose to strategically position themselves, and that is why they are always the last to speak, yet always the one who makes the most important decision. The highest form of influence is not making people obey you, but making them choose to change because of the feeling your presence gives them. You don't need to issue commands, you only need to exist at the right frequency. Your silence, when rooted in awareness, becomes a force field, making others feel they must be more thoughtful, more careful, more sincere. It is the most subtle form of power a human can possess. No violence, no titles, no noise, just stillness. When you truly understand the power of silence, you no longer need to be heard in every conversation. You only need to be felt. And that is the highest level of influence. You don't need to stand out. You only need to be deep, steady, and still. Like a lake that reflects the entire sky without disturbing a single ripple. There is a certain kind of person. They don't talk much. They don't try to impress. Yet when you speak to them, you feel seen for the very first time. not because they say something profound, but because they understand you in a way you've never been understood before. That is the power of psychological echo, the ability to reflect someone's inner world back to them. This ability allows others to perceive themselves through you. People with psychological echo don't listen to respond, they listen to feel. They don't just hear your words, they hear the fear behind each sentence, the longing within every pause. They can sense the pain that lies beneath your daily smiles. When they speak, they don't try to teach you anything. They simply reflect what you're holding inside, clearly, delicately, softly, just enough for you to see yourself. Human beings don't truly need advice. What they need is to be seen. They need to be understood, not judged, to be heard without being interrupted. It's important to touch someone without analyzing them, and those with psychological echo do exactly that. They don't say, "I understand you." They make you feel understood. Through their gaze, their silence, their refusal to fix you is what makes you feel understood. Their strength is not in their words, but in the depth of their presence. When they listen, they don't listen with their ears. They listen with their soul. And because of that, you open up without feeling threatened. You feel safe. A rare feeling in a world where most people are more focused on responding than understanding, not to understand. People with psychological echo are not born this way. They were once the most misunderstood. They were often given half-hearted attention. They were often judged while they were experiencing pain. And because they themselves were once pierced through, they learned not to pierce others. They know how painful it is to be read but not understood. So they become someone who sees deeply without invading. When you practice psychological echo, you begin to speak less and ask more questions. Not questions that lead or manipulate, but questions that help someone listen to their own inner voice. Instead of asking, "Why do you feel that way?" you might say, "It sounds like you've been carrying this weight for a long time." That sentence doesn't demand an answer. It opens a door for them to walk into themselves. Because everyone carries an unheard child. And when you speak in a way that resonates with that child, they melt. Not because your words are beautiful, but because you touch the part of them that was forgotten. In every conversation, those with psychological echo silently ask, "What does this person need at the deepest level?" Not praise, not advice. They focus on maintaining a respectful presence. They understand that every person carries invisible fears. Fear of being judged, fear of not being enough, fear of not being loved, fear of being left behind. And your task is not to break their defenses, but to let those defenses dissolve through the safety you create. When someone feels truly heard, they naturally want to cooperate. When someone feels truly seen, they naturally want to become better. That is why psychological echo is not just an art of communication. It is a tool of psychological leadership, not to force change, but to awaken the light inside someone, the part they forgot they had. Ordinary people listen to react. People with psychological echo listen to reflect, and in that reflection, the other person feels safe enough to be honest. They no longer fear the repercussions of visibility. When you are quiet enough to become a mirror, people begin to see themselves in you. And that is the beginning of real change. Notice this: the people who make you trust them instantly are not necessarily the most skilled, but the ones who don't try to display themselves. They don't consume space, they create space. And in that space, you finally feel there is room for you to exist. That is a kind of power no one can teach. The power born from a heart that has been broken. However, it remained unbroken. Psychological echo is the understanding that you cannot heal anyone with your words. You can only illuminate them with your presence. When they feel understood, they begin their own healing. And you only need to stand there, still, bright, and true. People who possess dark intelligence do not need to be harsh or unyielding. Occasionally, they only need to know how to listen, because understanding people is not about reading them, but about being gentle enough for them to open on their own. That is the point where strength meets compassion, where intellect meets heart, where understanding meets love. You don't need to possess anyone. You only need to become a mirror that reflects the best of them and let them see themselves through that light. When we are young, we believe the world is clearly divided. Good people and bad people, right and wrong, light and darkness. But as we grow up, we begin to realize those boundaries blur. And sometimes, the very people who are considered good end up hurting others simply because they believe too deeply in what they think is right. Because what we call right is really just one side of the story, and what we call wrong is sometimes just another way of surviving. In the deeper layers of human psychology, there is no action that is purely virtuous, and no action that is purely evil. There are only motives clouded by fear, by circumstance, and by the limits of one's awareness. Someone lies not necessarily because they are bad, but because they fear losing what matters most to them. Someone betrays not always out of selfishness, but because they haven't yet learned to be honest with themselves. Someone acts cruelly, not because they enjoy causing pain, but because they have been hurt to the point of believing that pain is the only way to survive. Ambiguous morality does not glorify darkness. It simply opens a more honest perspective on the nature of human behavior. Instead of judging, we begin to observe. Instead of taking sides, we begin to understand. And in that understanding, we find a balance between compassion and clarity. People do good not always because they are noble. Sometimes it's because they want to feel superior. And people do bad things, not always out of malice, but because they have no other choice. Moral clarity, or absolute morality, sounds noble, but in real life, it rarely exists. Because life does not operate through moral formulas. It operates through consequences. People with dark intelligence understand this. Sometimes doing the right thing causes harm, and doing the wrong thing saves someone, which is why they don't ask, is this good or bad? But instead, is this the right action for the right moment and the right purpose? Imagine you're leading a team. A member lies, makes a mistake, and causes damage. Kindness makes you want to forgive, but wisdom reminds you that forgiveness without boundaries is the seed of destruction later on. So sometimes, removing someone isn't an act of hatred, it's an act of protection for everyone else. In personal life, the same applies. You can tell the truth and hurt someone, or you can remain silent and spare them. Both are right, and both are wrong, depending on where you stand. That is where morality becomes ambiguous. You must become the referee between compassion and reason. Ambiguous morality is the ability to accept life's complexity without losing your moral core. You understand that right and wrong are not opposite ends, but 2 points on a circle of awareness, and sometimes the road to what is good passes through the gray zone. The immature need a world of black and white, so they know which side to choose. But those who truly understand do not choose a side. They choose responsibility, not responsible for appearances, but for consequences. In the shadows of power, rightness does not save you, awareness does, because sometimes what destroys you isn't evil, It's the illusion that you are doing something beneficial. History has shown enough people who caused harm in the name of morality. People convinced they were saving the world, but forgot to ask, does the world need to be saved in this way? Those with ambiguous morality do not lose their ethics. They simply stop pretending morality is always clear. They know. Sometimes kindness must come with firmness, compassion must come with boundaries, and forgiveness is not always love. Sometimes forgiveness is delaying justice. You cannot keep a soft heart forever in a world full of fangs. But you also don't need to become cruel to survive. What you need is the flexibility of moral intelligence. Flexibility is not compromise. It is knowing what serves the greater truth. If rigidity causes you to lose people, flexibility allows you to save both sides. People with dark intelligence live by a simple rule. Do what is necessary, but never forget your humanity. They do not need to be called beneficial, because they understand. The price of being loved is sometimes pretending not to see the truth. They choose respect, even if it means being disliked, because they know love can be blind, but respect never is. In the end, true morality isn't about always being right. It's about taking responsibility even when you are wrong. No running, no blaming, no justification. Just the courage to say, I chose this, and I accept the consequences. That is the strength of a mature soul, not being perfectly pure, but being honest with the darkness inside. People with ambiguous morality understand that every human carries both light and shadow. The difference is not which side you choose, but knowing when to let the light guide you and when to let the darkness protect you. Because ultimately, no one is entirely good, and no one is entirely evil. There are only people who understand themselves enough that they no longer need to prove who they are. And that is the highest form of wisdom. The wisdom to see the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. In a world full of bright lights, everyone wants to be seen. Everyone wants to be recognized, acknowledged, and understood. However, there is a different type of person. Someone who understands that the less they reveal, the freer they become. They don't disappear, but they appear strategically. They are not silent forever, but they only speak what is necessary for others to think they understand them, while in reality, they have only been allowed to see a very thin layer. This is the art of controlled exposure, revealing with intention. People often confuse honesty with bareness. They believe authenticity means saying everything, that opening up means exposing it all. But maturity teaches you that not everything true needs to be spoken. Honesty means choosing what is worth sharing and keeping the rest for yourself. The wise do not hide to deceive. They simply choose the right level of visibility for each space. They understand that not everyone is deep enough to understand them. And if you present too many versions of yourself to someone without the corresponding awareness, you will be distorted. Because they will project onto you what they want you to believe, not what is real. The less you let others know about you, the more they must fill in the blanks. And the intriguing thing is, people often fill those blanks with what they admire or what they fear. Both create influence, while you remain still, needing no justification, no reaction. Controlled exposure does not mean becoming cold or distant. It simply means you maintain the boundary between what is private and what is public. In a world where everyone is rushing to share, the one who knows how to hold back becomes the least vulnerable of all. They share enough to create connection, but never enough to expose everything. They tell their stories selectively because they know every piece of information is a doorway, and not everyone deserves to walk through it. People with dark intelligence understand this principle well. You don't have to hide. You just need to control the light that shines on you. When you need to shine, shine. When you need to fade, fade. Do not let others control your visibility. You chose it with full awareness. In relationships, controlled exposure is the shield that protects emotional freedom. You can be close, you can love, but you never hand someone the full map of who you are. You let them sense you, but not hold you. Because once they hold you, they can, intentionally or not, hurt you with the very things you shared. There's a kind of wisdom you only learn after falling hard. Never let someone know exactly how much you love them, how much you trust them, or how much you need them. Because in the unconscious game of human nature, information is always power. When you reveal everything, you lose initiative. When you hold back just enough, you make people read you more deeply. That's the moment you step out of being the one observed and become the one controlling the observation. The immature want to be seen. The grower wants to be understood correctly. But the truly wise, they only need to be understood correctly by themselves. In communication, controlled exposure is a form of soft power. You don't need to reveal all your plans, your feelings, or your intentions. Just say enough to spark curiosity and leave a space that makes others want to keep thinking about you. That's how you stay in their minds, longer than any full explanation could. People who provide excessive information cause the conversation to conclude. Those who say just enough make the conversation continue. Inside the listener's thoughts. When you live with controlled exposure, you begin to understand this. Part of your power lies in your blur. No one can attack a target they can't clearly see. No one can manipulate someone whose reactions they can't predict. Wisdom is not saying the right things, but in knowing how much to say. There's an old Japanese saying, "A wise person hides a blade within their smile." The blade here is not to harm. It is self-possession. You smile, you open up, and you show presence. But you always know where the boundary lies. It is not coldness, it is protecting your clarity from the curiosity of others. Those with controlled exposure make people feel they're close, yet there's still a part I cannot touch. And that untouchable part creates long-lasting allure because humans are drawn to what they cannot capture. You don't need to create mystery, just preserve the silence inside you. Because within that silence, all questions already have answers. When you reach this level of awareness, you no longer seek to be seen. You choose to be felt. You no longer need to prove your truth, because you know what is truly real doesn't need validation. In the end, controlled exposure is not just communication. It is a mature form of consciousness. It means you no longer fear being misunderstood because your identity is no longer tied to how others see you. You are bright enough to know when to shine and still enough to know when to hold back. Not everyone deserves your full light. Some people should only see you in a soft glow, just enough for them to learn something, but never enough to own you. The truly powerful never hide. They choose how to appear, and the truly free never need to shut the door. They simply know which door should remain gently open.